Hey everyone again, welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is Workshop Quick Takes. We recently had an episode where we replaced the pulley on a power steering pump in our XJ, and after that we soon had another problem that we needed to look into, and that was the harmonic balancer. So if you know you've got a collection of problems forming on the front end of your engine, you might want to do all the work at once and avoid having to put things in and take them out and put them in and take them out on the front end of the block. But in this case, we had to go at it a second time. So this does involve a couple special service tools again. The more complicated one to remove the pulley we demonstrate on the workbench before going out to the vehicle. Second one, didn't get that far with it, but it's fairly straightforward. It just uses a nut and a spindle to push the pulley right back on. Also, when we get to it, you're going to see we didn't swap out the key. This is a keyed crank, and so there's a little half-moon key that goes in there. We reused the one that was on there because it looked perfectly fine, but your kit should come with a replacement one. If you need it, just pull the old one out and swap the new one in. So let's get outside and see what this takes. The day after we got done doing that power steering pulley, started up the vehicle and heard one of those heart attack sounds, tick, 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 tick. Well, it was actually coming from the front of the engine, so the first thing I checked was the fan wasn't hitting. I got out the sticoscope, started listening to various accessories, wasn't getting any of them. So then I reached down onto the harmonic balancer and just dragged it a bit, and it went away instantly. So the harmonic balancer is at least partially separated and starting to wobble. That's bad mojo. If that thing walks off, then you throw your belt, and that's kind of the end of it until you get it fixed. Now the harmonic balancer is right down there. It's what you might also think of as your main crank pulley, right down there below the water pump. And from the top side, it looks ridiculous to get to, but from the bottom side, it might not actually be so bad. For those of you who still have your OEM trim panel on the bottom front, you'll want to remove that off between the bumper cap corners to get more access, but otherwise, down here it's potentially looking promising. I would just need to get the electric fan out of the way and the fan shield, and I think we have enough room to get the crow's foot puller in there. The other thing I see happening back in here is there's some oil leakage from somewhere, and that might be our crank seal. So this is a good time to tackle both, because once you pull this off, you have the crank seal right behind that. Now, just like before, we're going to need to start removing 8mm bolts, but this time we're actually going to pull all four, 1, 2, 3, 4, and get the fan shroud out of the way as well. Now, if you have the OE fan still installed, then this shroud, once you remove the screws, just lifts up and out. Ours we've modified because we put an extra heavy-duty fan clutch on there, and so the fan shroud will no longer pass in front of the fan clutch, so we have a little hinge contraption on the bottom to remove it. That's not stock, that's just what we had to do. And I think I have to cut a zip tie also for the way I did that. Yeah. That should give us the maximum possible clearance of the harmonic balance pulley. And just like we did before, go ahead and keep the belt on until we try and get this loosened, because it's a little bit of a trick to walk that main crank bolt off. But I would like to get this line out of the way, because that line, if I damage it, it's going to be a pain to have to change. So the way that's going to come off is over here. The reason I'm going to remove this and not use the quick connect down there is that the quick connect, while it does work, I don't know if it's going to reseal properly putting it back together. Also, I would still have to loosen this anyway in order to rotate that pipe out of the way, so I might as well just loosen the pipe and move the whole thing. Now the correct way to do this is to use a 15/16 on the outer end of this brass bushing and then a 3/4 to turn that one right there. I don't have a 3/4 at this location, so I'll use a 19 box end wrench instead, and it should still do the job. Okay, so there's the 15/16. I need that to make sure that the inner bushing doesn't turn. And indeed, I can even turn it a little to the right, and it's very stiff, so I don't think it's loose at all. The 3/4 in turn. Yeah, that's all there is to it. It's loose now, I should be able to thumb that off. Since this hasn't been run in a while, all the fluid should be mostly drained back into the transmission. So as long as I keep this one up high, I shouldn't have to worry about too much fluid leaking out. Yeah, just a little bit of a couple drops hanging out right there. But I'm going to take a couple pieces of nitro glove, because that is starting to leak a bit. Right down on the radiator hose, which is not oil resistant at all. Hopefully that'll help catch some of that. And then the rest of this glove I'll use on this end over here. And then this is currently rerouted down there for my transmission cooler, so the way I'm showing it here is not even going to be exactly the way it looks on yours. This pipe is correct, but the rubber hose down there is not. I'm thinking I might be able to just route this up and around the back of the fan like that, and that should keep it up and out of the way There we go. That way if the balancer pulley drops, it's not just going to hit that and drag it down with it. Okay, if you've never used a crow's foot puller before, let's just step inside of the bench real quick and show how that works exactly, because it's a little bit easier to see it going in and out of the pulling holes on a demo unit. So we'll do it on the new one and then bring it out here with correct bolts already selected and do it on this one here to pull this off. Well, once again, we're going to have to use a specialty puller. Now this one here is from Harbor Freight. You'll notice it still says Pittsburgh, and they've been changing all their inventory over to Maddox, so that shows I've had this hanging around for a while. I've got it, I don't have to go rent it, so that's a plus. What it is this central puller bolt, puller flange, 3 different possible types and sizes of tips that just snap in here with a, like that. That one there's a little bit on the smaller side, that one there's a little on the larger side. I think since we'll have a flat crank surface to work on, I can probably work with this one. So that's what we're going to be starting with today. However, this one doesn't fit through backwards, so we have to do it in this order. That's going to go in there, and that's going to snap in there, and now we're ready to go. What we also need to find, however, is 3 bolts that match up with these holes. These here are just empty, but these 3 here have some kind of metric thread. I'm not sure what size it is, but it does line up with this bolt, and unfortunately only that bolt, because these shorter ones here almost look like they'd be a little more convenient to work with, but it's the wrong thread. There's some other sizes scattered through here, so depending what you encounter on yours, you pick the right 3, 2, whatever, and then you thread them in there. However, we also need washers.
And I'm talking about you.
And unfortunately, this is what the kit came with. Cheap, terrible little things. They will bend to bits. Now granted, they are kind of sacrificial since you're not using them for a permanent mount, you're just using them as part of the puller assembly. But I have a collection of grade 8s over here, and these here are a little on the large side, so I'm thinking I should probably just stack them. If I stack them, I can do this. Get those as far in as they'll go before we hit the block. We'll do the same thing for the other 2 here. These is perfectly fine to grease up a little bit if you need to, just to make them easier to get in and out. We are, however, going to be putting them under pressure, and so we're going to want to make sure that when we come up, all 3 of them are roughly the same height, because we want this to be pulling uniformly on the pulley. Now you'll have to decide how far these go in. You don't want to tighten them up against the block. That's not the point. Once they're in, they're all going to be coming through, and you're just going to want to make sure that they end up going through about the same amount. So you'll have to visually indicate that. Once we do that, however, we get that preset to the crank on the front of the engine, of course. We're going to be ready to pull this off, and we'll just keep turning this until it pushes it off. Well, that there is an English size, but it looks like I can get it with a 19. And this is supposed to be a normal right-hand thread, so ideally I'm going to break it by turning it to the left. And it's definitely going to turn the whole engine, isn't it? There's some people recommend actually pulling the #1 spark plug and putting nylon rope in there so that it compresses against that, and then you get the resistance you need. I prefer not to do that if I can help it. So let's just try putting this and letting it suck that down into the belt and see what happens. Not easily. I wonder if I could actually wedge a tool or even a couple bolts. Either way, it looks like it'll be easier to get at it from underneath here. There we go. That actually didn't take as much as I thought it would. Okay, I don't know if I got lucky or if that's just normal torque, but I thought it's supposed to be around 100 foot-pounds. Anyway. Okay, so that's what we pulled off. 1 bolt, 1 washer. Before continuing further, I do need to release the serpentine belt, which I've got to do by loosening that. And that will release with a 15. Same as the tensioner bolt up here, as I recall. Yep. Got that on a little tight last time, I guess. Okay. And then this one up here should be turning freely. It is. The belt should now be pretty loose. And get that off the water pump. The harmonic balancer should now also be free. So this here is now ready to pull, and for that we need to get to the crow's foot tool. Now we're going to install this just like we showed on the workbench. On this particular one, this shank turns with a 14, but it may vary depending on your tool.
There we go. It's wanting to jam up awfully early though. Okay, they're all in far enough that they won't drop. So now I'm gonna go get the ratchet and finish that. Well, that's not quite as far in as I was hoping, but maybe as far as I go in today. Important thing is that they all go in the same amount. Okay, what's important about this is that they're all in the same amount. I was hoping just to drive them all the way to the end of the stems, but that didn't happen. So now, I'm gonna manually just turn this out until it locks up. And there it is. Now I get that 14, and I just start turning that and very slowly pull it off. There's a special service tool for this, but I don't have it, so I'll be what I am, a solitary man. There we go. Now I can hold it. Getting close. And we're free. Okay. Tricky, but it just comes off. Well, there it is. You can definitely see the rubber deteriorated and separating here. So that's why I was starting to wobble. Hadn't quite separated. Some of these I've seen people take them out and they actually come out in two pieces. Now you need to pull the crank seal out of there. It's that big round thing sticking out front, and not lose the key back in the crank if that thing's loose. I don't know if it is or not. I do know that mine came with a replacement, but that's definitely been leaking oil for a bit on there, so we need to deal with that. Well, next up I need to try and get that oil seal out, but first, there's so much filth down there. This here looks like an old sock with a hole in it, but it's actually a rag. Let's take this rag, try and wrap it around here, and then see if we can get a little bit of the filth off without flooding it into the crankcase. Oh yeah, that's looking pretty good. Next, carbon choke cleaner. Probably illegal in several states, including this one now, but looks like I might have gouged the aluminum timing cover there a little bit. Good stuff. Oh yeah, let's get another rag and start wiping that off now. Okay, that's nice because now I can actually see the perimeter of the seal that I need to pull out too. Now we've got that cleaned up enough that we can work with it. Let's see what it takes to actually pick that thing out of there. Maybe I need to use the screwdriver or a pry bar. Well, it's a start, I guess. Well, there's the spring. So at least I know I'm not going to lose that in there. There's the rest of the spring right there. Don't want to lose that inside. I got these pieces, so I know those aren't going to fall back in the oil pan, so that's a plus. I'm not sure if I'm actually going to get this out of here without cracking the timing cover. That'd be something. Ow! Thing is baked in there. Okay, finally got it to pop. I just had to keep tapping at the metal ring until I popped enough metal out that I was able to get a real good grip on it with the vice grips, and now it finally wants to come free. There it is. Now I've dinged up the aluminum around here a little bit, so I'm going to have to do just a real light surface cleaning on that. Thankfully, I didn't damage the inside of that too much. Let's go ahead and just do a very light sponge sanding in there, around the edge here where I dinged it up a bit. Doesn't feel rough, which is good because the new seal has to slip in past all that. And now just a brass bristle brush to make sure. Using brass because it'll clean up the aluminum, but it won't scar the crankshaft there. And now, just try and spray a little bit of this around the inside there. Let it run down the sides to clean it out. not feeling that sock catch on anything, so I don't think I have any rough edges that'll tear up the seal. Okay, here's where things can get a little tricky, because now I got to get the new seal on. That's what it looks like. It goes in this way. The spring is on the inside, and so one thing I've heard recommended is to just fill that with grease before you put it in, just to help ensure that the spring doesn't pop out while you're working. I don't know if that's true or not, but it can't hurt to do it. So I'm going to use this black moly grease here, so as it goes into the oil, hopefully it'll harden up a few things for fun. Now here's where this gets doubly fun. This seal has a little bit of a nitrile lip on it, but it doesn't have a full nitrile seal around the perimeter. So it's recommended, I don't know if it's required, but it's recommended to use a little bit of anaerobic gasket maker. In this case, I've got Permatex Ultra Black that I think will work fine. I'm just going to use a very, very thin layer of it. I'm going to go ahead and apply that on the inside of the lip down there. First, I need to really clean the outside of this. For this, I am going to use a thin glove so I can actually work my finger in there and just put a very, very thin layer around there because I don't want it to create any balls that are left in there. Next step is to very, very gently line that up and just try and tap it in with a soft hammer. And that did not work. Yeah, see, it wants to roll around in there. Yeah, it's warping. Now I do happen to have this little cup from my Harbor Freight ball joint set, and that one's a little big. Let me try one size smaller and I think we'll have it. One of these two might do it. Well, there's a good size, but I might not have enough clearance to use it. And that did not work. It doesn't actually need to be much more than flush. Let's go ahead and sink it in just a little further. Wow. After all that, we can finally get back to putting our new harmonic balancer on. Okay, before we actually put that on, there's one more thing we still need to do, and that is grease the outside of this shaft here so that it doesn't rip up the seal when it's going in. You can use a little oil too if you prefer, but this won't run off while we're working with it, so it seems fine to me. I need this piece and these three pieces so I can get started over here. Now we go underneath with it. Let's see if I can get this on lined up with the key slot. There it is. And from there we start pressing. Okay, here we are. It's getting deeper, so looks like it's working. Yeah, I think that's it. Only got a couple mils of clearance to the timing cover, so I don't think you can get too much closer. One more step before we put the bolt in. Originally there was some kind of crud on here that was the sealant. You're supposed to put that around the key slot there in order to prevent oil from creeping out of it while it's running. So hopefully that does the trick. So there it is, sealant over the keyhole, pressed on as tight as it'll go. I think we're ready to put the bolt in place. I flipped it over so I don't have to grind that old sealant off. Okay, now we're gonna have to torque that up to, I believe, 100 foot-pounds. Okay, before we try and finish torquing up the bolt down there, which we do need to do, let's go ahead and get our belt restrung so that we can use that as part of how we prevent this thing from moving around arbitrarily. Now, does it line up? Because that's the other question. If it lines up, then we're in good shape. If it doesn't, we got a problem still. Looks like it does. Make sure we're actually centered on the alternator pulley, which we are not. Now we are. And then on the AC pulley. Down and around on the water pump. Looks like we're good on the new balancer there. Okay, it looks like everything looped over where it's supposed to. Okay, we'll start with that, and if we have to, we can loosen it again later. All right, now we need to figure out how to do that pulley down there to get 100 foot-pounds. Now we're getting there. Need to start doing this side if it's going to work. I think it's just going to slip. Well, that might work. Not great for the belt. But let's go ahead, get our torque wrench and see if we're getting the right torque on there. Okay, I've got my scale set for just about for 100 foot-pounds, so... Oh boy. Yeah, that's just trashing the belt. I could try putting my pry bar in the pulley again. Oh, there we go. Okay, I like it. Well, hopefully that holds. If it doesn't, I'll hear a loud explosion when it fails to hold. All right, see if we can get that wired out of there. There you go. So that needs to rotate down like that. This is going to go back on in the reverse of how it came off. That should be good. To make sure the one going into the radiator did not loosen up. Nope, still tight. Okay, we should be finally at the point where we can at least do a test launch. I haven't put any of the shrouds or the electric fan back on yet. First, I want to see if it starts okay. I didn't leave any tools or other things in the way. I don't see anything in here for me. Oh, there's my bolt. I wondered where that went. Well, I'm glad I just saw that now. Now we're back to where I want to be. Yeah, I don't see anything trying to climb off. The pulley was spinning true, didn't look like it was wobbling at all or anything weird. And then we can put the rest of the front end back together and we're good to go. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us again. Hopefully you found that helpful. This is a little more involved than some of the other jobs we've demonstrated, but it can be done with patience, basic hand tools, and a couple special service tool kits, because if you don't have those, there's a good chance you're going to make a mess out of this trying to get that harmonic balancer off and then the new one back on. But those are usually available at your local parts store, so you don't necessarily have to buy them. Just get the rental kit and then check it back in for the refund when you're done. Most of the stores offer that service for you. So thanks for joining us again today, and we'll see you again next time, whenever that is.
Has anyone seen my phone?